Hello, BookTube. Every once in a while, the YouTube algorithm, or one of you looking to make trouble, will feed up to me the link to a video that I might not ordinarily watch, but that is at least tangentially about books, which is my own bailiwick. It's my own subject. And that happened recently. One of you sent me the link to a video that we're going to talk about today. So for those of you in the cheap seats who are wondering, yes, indeed, this is the return of Bro Watch, not Baywatch, not the greatest TV show in the history of the world, but Bro Watch, in which I watch over and over again a particular video from one of these brotivational grifters and try to make some sense of it for you. I will leave a link to the video down below, although once again, as always with Bro Watch, I'm not 100% advocating that you watch it. It will infuriate you. The video in question today is called How to Read, with read in air quotes, 1,000 books a year. And it's by a YouTuber named Ali Abdaal, who at the time that I watched his video had well over 2 million subscribers, and this particular video had well over 6,000 views. And a ton of comments, most of them adoring. And with this video for Bro Watch, as with any Bro Watch video, one of the organizational questions that you want to ask yourself at the beginning is, it's pretty simple. Is the person who's making this video explicitly lying to me? Not differences of opinion here, and not even questions of delusion. Not a question of that the person believes something, even though it isn't true. I'm talking about where the person is just lying to you in order to get your eyeballs, your clicks, your affiliate links, your money, your merch money, whatever it is, whatever the reason is. And well, this video gets off to a rocky start because the title of the video itself is a lie. Not only that, creepy air quotes over the word read. There's only one way to read. so I don't know what that means. If you're not, are you talking about reading or not? But also, the video does not tell you how you can read 1,000 books a year. So we're off to a bad start, but that might just be a clickbaity video, which is the way that YouTube liars tend to console themselves. They say, oh, I'm not lying, I'm just making a clickbaity title. Clickbait is a lie. But we won't get doctrinaire right out of the gate. Instead, we'll move on to the video itself and wonder if maybe there are explicit lies in the video. I think you're going to get the gist of my own response video here that I think there are, especially right from the beginning. The very first thing that Ali Abdaal says is, I've got a confession to make. I do read around 1,000 books a year, but I don't finish 1,000 books a year. I only finish somewhere between 70 and 100. And there are multiple lies in that sentence. The first is, it's not a confession. I've got a confession to make means I've been hiding this from you. I might be a little ashamed of it. I might think you're going to be ashamed of it. None of that is true. This is just a flat statement. And I think the statement is a lie. First of all, if you don't finish 1,000 books a year, then what do you do with them? And why are you calling that reading? And if you're calling that reading, then how on earth do you expect us to believe you when you say that that you only finish somewhere between 70 and 100? If the title and the first part of your first sentence were lies, then how are we supposed to believe the last part of the first sentence isn't also a lie? But the point that he's making at the beginning here is that you might rebel against the idea that he's started 1,000 books in a year but not finished 1,000 books in a year. And he says that that is a societal trap. That is a trap that society imposes on you of thinking that books are sacred, hallowed objects. He means hallowed, and he will get there eventually. That if you start one, you're duty-bound morally to finish it. And he says that this is false. This is harmful and not real. This is just an imposition that society puts on you in order to make a metric by which the number of books you read is pure vanity metric that we use to impress other people. And this is slightly firmer ground. That is absolutely true. Society does tend to think that, to the detriment of readers everywhere. But nevertheless, he's here to promise something, right? The title of his video promises something. How to read, in scare quotes, 1,000 books a year. And you'll never guess what, this being BroTube, he has a multi-step plan that he wants you to follow. Well, I thought we'd go through those steps and see what we make of them. Step 1 is feed the funnel. And this is, Ali Abdaal here is saying, this is not you setting a list of the books that you're going to read. much less getting to work reading them. This is something more general than that. This is where you use a whole bunch of different means to determine which books are even candidates for reading. That's what feeding the funnel is. You're filling your funnel with potential books to read. And he has some advice about how you can do that. He mentions, for instance, the best places to go for book reviews are, and then right out of his mouth comes some of the worst places to go for book reviews. He mentions, for instance, Goodreads. And he says that Goodreads is fun, that it's a game, that it's very engaging because it's all communal. He mentions in passing that he is one of the top 10 most friended people in the UK on the Goodreads site, and that he would like to ascend in the rankings. And one of the most enthusiastic comments on his video is by Jack Edwards, another UK YouTube influencer who likes to talk about books that he hasn't read, and who is also one of the top 10 most watched people on the Goodreads platform. Goodreads is one of the places that he tells you to go for book recommendations. Another is Book Twitter. You're probably recoiling, as well you should be, and I really, really doubt that somebody who's telling you a way to read 1,000 books a year should be telling you to look at Twitter at all, for any reason. And the third place that he tells you to look in this list is podcasts. He doesn't specify or name any podcasts, it's just podcasts. Find a bookish podcast, or maybe it doesn't even have to be a bookish podcast, and maybe you'll get some recommendations there. But he also has a more specific recommendation for where you can get book recommendations. And by this point, in any Bro Watch video, you might be watching along and thinking, okay, so the title of his video has made a promise that he obviously has no intention of keeping. It's obvious BS. And he's starting to talk about value extraction, funnels, that sort of thing. And all of this is reminding you of something, isn't it? It's reminding you of our old friend Blinkist. A for-pay service where you get, you subscribe and you get short summaries of the 180 dumbest brotivational nonfiction books on the market at the moment. But Ali Abdaal is not here to plug Blinkist. Being the hard worker that he is, he has found a version of Blinkist that is both dumber and much more expensive. It's called Shortform. And he wants to make a point about Shortform when he mentions it as a place to go for potential recommendations. Shortform is a place you sign up, you pay, and you get one-page summaries of the top 200 dumbest 4-hour workweek type crapola that is out on the market. But Ali Abdaal wants to make a point about Shortform. He says, and I quote, "They are not sponsoring this video. They are not paying me to say this." And then 1 second later, literally the next line that he says is that the link that he's giving you to Shortform is an affiliate link, which means if you click on it, he gets paid. Now, I don't know what kind of hair splitting you have to do in your mind to think that that doesn't mean that Shortform is paying you. Do you have a Shortform affiliate link? No. Do I? No. Does Ali Abdaal profit if you give your business to Shortform? Yes. Do they know that he profits from that? Do they give him money by him generating interest in Shortform? Yes. Yes, that is all true. If that doesn't count as being paid by them, then it's the merest of face-saving technicalities, and you shouldn't believe it any more than you should believe most of what you're encountering in this video. But if Ali Abdaal is not being paid by Shortform, if they're not governing the content of this video, if they're not leaning over his shoulder to make sure that he's earning his keep, then this will probably be the last time that we hear about them, right? Oh, probably. Let's move on to step number 2. Remember in mind, this is a 4-step process for how to read 1,000 books a year. Step number 2 is to make it effortless. And here he means, the first thing he mentions is audiobooks. What he's talking about when he says make it effortless is the same thing that brotivational speakers are always talking about. They give the very clear implication that they would give anything if the way of extracting value from these crappy books that they read weren't reading. They would like nothing better than some sort of cybernetic connection to a content cloud, rather than going through the stupid, dumb, geeky process of reading a book. It's just so obvious when you watch their videos that they hate the very idea of reading. Another thing that's obvious in this video is also obvious in a lot of brotivational videos, which is that they can't stand talking to you. Ali Abdaal cannot get through this video fast enough to stop soiling himself with your company. It gets particularly visible towards the end of his video that he can't wait for it to be over. And by extension, that he really can't wait until he has an empire in which he can pay a flunky to do these kinds of videos instead of doing them himself. But the main implication here that he wants for making it effortless is to try your hardest to eliminate the whole act of reading. One of the ways you do that is Audible. He plugs Audible. He says it's made a game changer in his life. He once again repeats the lie that he said a few times in videos of his, that he could only have one app on his phone. If that were a law and he could only have one, it would be Audible. That is quite obviously not true. Of course, there would be 6 or 7 finance apps or time management apps that he would have before Audible. But he says that, and he praises audiobooks. And a lot of you are audiobook fans. I don't think that you would view them as making reading effortless. I would think that those of you who love audiobooks are still putting the time in to pay attention to what you're hearing. But he has another suggestion for how to make it effortless, for how to make reading effortless. And you're never going to guess what that suggestion is. It's short form. Yes, amazingly, short form shows up in step number 2, just as it showed up in step number 1. And he mentions here that short form gives you those one-page summaries that are fairly detailed, as much as one page can be, that will really help to make filling your funnel effortless. And he has a quote. I thought I'd read it to you. By reading the more detailed chapter summaries on short form, you're basically reading the book at 10x speed. There's zero fluff, so practically every sentence is insightful and applicable to our lives. That sure sounds like ad copy to me. I don't know about you. Certainly it sounds nothing like the rhetoric, vocabulary, or diction of anything in any other Ali Abdaal video. It certainly sounds like copy that he's been handed and told to recite. If that's true, then it could be that his opening statement, what was it? They're not sponsoring this video, they're not paying me to say this, might be an explicit lie. Certainly I would be less inclined to believe that if short form appeared in step number 1 and we never heard about them again. But here they are in step number 2 with what sounds like a canned sans pitch. There's zero fluff, so practically every sentence is insightful and applicable to our lives. With a big flashing subscribe here sign, you practically expect to see it. But that's step number 2, is to make it effortless. Try as best as you can to eliminate all these boring books. Just get the content extraction. What you're talking about here is a quarry, basically, of raw, dirty rock. And you are going in there with a bit drill to get stuff out. Honestly, in these brotivational videos about books, you would swear that the guy in front of the camera has never even heard of fiction, much less poetry. They have no idea. To them, books are just quarries where you go in with a pick and a hammer and you get out the 1 or 2 nuggets. All the rest of it is just barren dirt. The joy of the reading experience, it's like they've never even heard of it. But we have more steps to go through. So let's go on to step number 3. Step number 3 in his 4-step program to read 1,000 books a year is the blog post mindset. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, that's a title, that's not a step, but let's give it a little leeway here. The blog post mindset, according to Ali Abdaal, is to treat books like blog posts. Now, those of you who write blog posts and put some time and effort into it, I did for 10 years, are not going to like the implication of this step at all, which is that blog posts are just farted out crap that might accidentally have some worth in them, but that have no worth on their own. The worth is going to have to be extracted from the dross of the blog post itself. And here he says that he repeats a point that you should feel free to drop a book if it's not appealing to you, or to skip around inside the book. Maybe chapter 3 has stuff that you want to extract, but chapter 7 does not, or vice versa. And part of that is true, right? Not the skipping around. That's what a moron does. That's what a small child does who's never been taught any kind of self-control. But it is definitely true that if you are reading your way through a book and it's not pleasing you, you should stop reading it. But it's at this point in step 3, when he's going through these ideas, that he gives a quote that I think is the sum and essence of this whole video, and it's going to be really hard for you to hear. I want to stress here, though, this is a Bro Watch video. I know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to lifelong passionate readers who love the process, who love books, who love the nuance and the multifaceted voices and all of that. So you're not gonna like this quote. I thought maybe you should be sitting down for it. The quote is, if I read a book summary, whether it's on short form, oh, there's that name again. There's 3 mentions in 3 steps. Or Blinkist, You didn't want them to leave out Blinkist. You honestly didn't think you were going to watch a video like this without hearing the word Blinkist, did you? Or just some random blog post that some dude's written on Medium that I found through Google, I don't see that as being any different to reading the actual book. Shall I read that quote again? Probably screaming not to, but let's do it again. Suffering is good for the soul. If I read a book summary, whether it's on Shortform, or Blinkist, or just a random blog post that some dude's written on Medium that I found through Google, I don't see that as being any different to actually reading the book. To which I would respond, I do. The reason why I see those as two different things is because they're two different things. They aren't even relatively close to being the same thing. And just you saying they're the same thing doesn't make them so. What Ali Abdaal is saying in this quote, and the spirit of this quote runs throughout his entire video, is that hearing about a book is the same thing as reading it. That hearing about a book, not even just Shortform, his Lord and Master, but also just some dude on Google. If you've read or glanced at some random dude's Google post summary of a book, then that is, I don't see that as being any different to reading the actual book. I'm pretty sure that everyone listening to me right now does see those two things as being different. Hearing about something is not the same thing as reading it. Obviously, they are not the same thing. I'd like to think that anyone listening to Ali Abdaal's video would immediately say, those aren't the same thing. You're saying they are, but they're not. And I'm pretty sure, not to harp too much on the theme of explicit lying, that Ali Abdaal knows this is simply not true. No question of elastic interpretation here or anything like that. Hearing some dude talk about something on Google is not the same thing as reading that book. They aren't the same thing at all. But that's what ends step number 3, and then we get on to the fourth and final step, step number 4, which is pretty hilariously titled Go Deep. If you are claiming to your millions of viewers that just hearing some random dude on Google talk about a book is the same thing as reading the book, you have no business titling one of your steps Go Deep. But nevertheless, he does. And the point that he's making in the step that's called Go Deep is that you should, once you have filled your funnel and once some books have started to excrete the other end, and you're starting to concentrate on reading them, as he hilariously puts it, properly, then you should engage with the book. Grapple with it with your hands. Take notes. Write your own summaries. Do that sort of thing. Engage with it directly. As a means to help you read 1,000 books a year, I don't see it. But certainly when you're talking about general advice in terms of reading, it's bound to come up. I'm surprised that it came up on this video, but I'm not surprised about what else comes up in step number 4. You're never going to guess what it is. You know what another helpful thing is for you going deep? Why, it's short form. He mentions that he really loves the really smart, interactive aspects that you get when you subscribe, paying through the nose, for short form, as a last-ditch, desperate attempt for you not to read. He's assuming, all of these companies, all these bro watch guys, all these grifters, are assuming that you will do anything other than read, that you'll pay any amount of money, as long as you'll free me from the idea that I have to read. No amount is too much. He says that he really likes the interactive questions, discussion prompts, summaries that you can find on Shortform. I dug around a little and saw some of these things. They aren't particularly smart. They aren't anything better than what you could come up with on your own. And since they aren't anything smart or anything better than you could come up with on your own, I'm kind of wondering what they're doing in this step. Since, let's go all the way to the top here, what was the original quote? They're not sponsoring this video. They're not paying me to say this. By the point that Shortform shows up in all 4 steps of how to read, in air quotes, 1,000 books a year, by the time Shortform shows up in the 4th consecutive step, I am pretty much willing to say that they are paying you, and that if I check the payment records, if we could dig through the paperwork or the electronic trail, we would find that you have been explicitly paid to make a commercial about Shortform and to lie about that fact. Because some of these companies, like Blinkist or whatever, are starting to realize that an outward, obvious, explicit sponsorship shill video will turn off as many people as it attracts. And so they were in a hypothetical in which Ali Abdaal is explicitly lying to you about whether or not he's been paid by Shortform. I would say that probably part of that email exchange, which is recoverable, is them saying, say that we didn't pay you. Just enthused, but don't talk about any kind of quid pro quo sponsorship. I might be willing to say that that trail might exist somewhere, especially since Shortform's help, their aids for you to go deeper, aren't any better than what you could come up with on your own. They aren't outstanding. And so why would he be plugging them? For the fourth step in a row. And you might be asking here, why this bothers me. Those are our 4 steps. They're fairly anodyne. You might be wondering why this kind of video bothers me, why I make Bro Watch videos like this. And the reason is simple. You can see it in this video. Ali Abdaal plugs his book club. He has a book club. There's many, many, many people enthusiastically participating as he proctors a book club. And that kind of influence for him and a bunch of other book-related but anti-reading influencers is only going to grow greater if we let it grow greater. It's entirely possible, given his media following, that in a couple of years, Ali Abdaal would be asked to be on the judging committee of the Booker. Do you want that to be true? Somebody who thinks that hearing a summary from a random dude on Google is the same thing as reading a book? I don't. That's what bothers me about this, is that he has an enormous reach. He has an enormous audience, and he is spewing absolute self-serving, lazy, lying garbage to them and getting thousands of views for it. That's what bothers me about this kind of video and other videos like it. That's why I would ever do a response video on this channel instead of talking about books myself. But I want to talk about the 4 key takeaways from this video, right? At the end of every Bro Watch video, we try to assess what it is that we've actually experienced and is there anything worthwhile in it. And the first takeaway from this video is the only slim strand of agreement that I might have with Ali Abdaal, which is that it is perfectly acceptable for you to bail on a book. It is perfectly acceptable for you to do that. If you've given it a fair shot, 10 pages, 15 pages, 20, 30 pages, you'll know how long is long enough. If you've given it that fair shot and it's not doing anything for you at all, drop it. No matter how well respected it is, no matter how canonical it is, no matter how highly it's praised, even by me, drop it. Books are not sacred hallow or hallowed objects. They need to sing for their supper. Ali Abdaal is completely right when he says that that is a mistake that society imposes on lots of people. That artificial elevation of books as holy objects, where what was the term on Twitter just a few weeks ago? Where you're personally insulting the author if you don't finish the book. Nonsense. Nonsense. The author is a performer. The book is a performance. If it stops interesting you, if it starts boring you, put it down. And if you mention to somebody that you started reading that book and it just didn't do anything for you so you stopped, and they try to make you feel bad about it, well, that says a lot more about them than it does about you. And takeaway number 2, I would think, flows directly from takeaway number 1, although apparently not. It is an obvious tautology, and you would think those would be obvious, but apparently, given the rest of this video, it's not. Which is that if you start a book and it's not doing anything for you and you drop it, fine and good. You should, without any remorse at all, no guilt whatsoever. But if you do that, you haven't read that book. I would like to think that goes without saying. Probably for my own audience, it does. If you haven't read a book, you haven't read a book. So if you start a book, or if you read chapter 7 only of a book, you should not say that you have read that book, because that statement is a lie, and lies are bad. So that is takeaway number 2, which is that if you haven't read the book, you haven't read the book. You don't have owe anyone any excuses for that, but you do owe people the honesty of not claiming something that isn't true. And then we have 2 more takeaways, and they're a little bit more serious. They're a little bit more nuanced. So I want to preface both of them by saying that I don't know Ali Abdaal. I've never met him personally. I never will. He'll never see this video. I have no connection with him whatsoever. But I want to point out, the third takeaway that I want to point out here is that you absolutely should not trust Ali Abdaal when it comes to the subject of books. I would like to think that this also is completely obvious from watching his video. In his video, he not only tells you that he is going to lie about what he considers reading a book, but also that he's sort of happy with that. Anyone who tells you that up front, who says, well, as far as I'm concerned, hearing about a book from some random dude on Google is the same thing as having read it, equivalent to having read the book. Anyone who tells you that has forfeited any right to be trusted on this subject at all. And I don't just mean the raw statistical stuff of him telling you, well, sure, I fill my funnel with thousands of books, but I actually read only 70. Even that. Why on earth would you believe that statement? Why would you believe that this guy reads anything after what he has already told you? So that's the third takeaway. And again, I want to stress it's not personal. I don't know this guy. And the fourth takeaway is even more serious, so I want to stress again, I don't know Ali Abdaal. I have no axe to grind against him at all. Like most of YouTube, in fact, I did have a previous exposure to one of his videos. He made a great video about how much he loves his Kindle. I'd be willing to bet it's had millions of views by now. I watched that video when I was, I imagine, doing what a lot of people did. I was looking around on YouTube for videos about a Kindle, prefatory to maybe getting one. Came across his video and really liked it, found it very helpful. That's the most exposure that I've had. I don't know him otherwise, but I do know about him because in the description part of every video of his, he mentions that he is a medical doctor working and practicing in the UK. So the final takeaway from his video that I want to give you is one that I will express in the form of a question, which is, would you trust Ali Abdaal as a doctor? He has made a video in which he says that merely hearing about a book from some random dude on Google is to him the equivalent of having read that book. He's made a video in which he very heavily implies that he's perfectly happy to lie about that fact, that when you hear him talk, oh, I read 1,000 books last year, he will not specify that he actually didn't do that, that he actually didn't do that. That because he knows that if he mentions to you that he thinks that hearing a summary from some random dude on Google is the same thing as reading a book, you won't agree with him. So I'd be willing to bet, doesn't mention it. He's already made a video in which he tells you all of that, shows you all of that. Given that, I will ask just a question, which is, would you trust him as a doctor? With having read your patient history, with having gone through your gallbladder results, with having studied your blood panel workup, would you trust him knowing that? I myself know the answer to that question for myself. You'll have to answer it on your own. In the interest of fairness, I will of course leave a link to his video, but that does it for this latest installment of Bro Watch. These videos are absolutely exhausting because of their horrifying combination of lying and grift and opportunism and anti-intellectualism, anti-reading. So I'm kind of glad to be done with it. I want to thank the malefactor who sent me the link, but I'm going to go back to reading books instead of extracting value from them, and I'm also going to go back to talking about them with you. So this will be the last Bro Watch video for a bit, I would think. I certainly hope so. I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.